Hey everyone, Connie here, and welcome to my review for Space Jam: A New Legacy. So, after over 20 years, after over 2 decades, we have a sequel to Space Jam. And I was kind of wondering, am I going to react to this? Am I going to watch on my own time? And I decided for the latter. Not only just because I think I wouldn't really have as much reactionary stuff to focus on, and I felt like I would just enjoy it better watching it on my own. But because this movie does have a lot of nostalgic importance to me, you could say. Because when growing up, I would constantly watch the original Space Jam whenever I went to my grandmother's. She had it on VHS, and every time I went over there, it was one of those movies I would always want to watch, along with the likes of Remember the Titans. I would always want to watch Space Jam, and I've seen it dozens of times. No joke. I loved it, and I've seen it as an adult. Still loved it because it's a good movie. It's a enjoyable, fun, well-made movie. And I was going into this with a little bit of trepidation because there's some things that I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of in terms of changes and whatnot, and but we'll get into that. So first off, I want to talk about the fact that this movie is one of those movies that recently, and it's not the only one that's had this issue, which is why I'm saying this, but it's one of those movies recently that has gotten entirely panned by critics and has a rotten score on Rotten Tomatoes, for example. Not that that should ever influence your feelings on a movie, but yet the audience loves it. It's not like the best or highest rated, but like again, on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience gives it 80%, where it's like half of that, if that, for critics. And this is something that just I've always noticed and is a reason I've always been just not a huge fan of judging movies based on critic reviews and stuff. It's like I'll watch some reviews and stuff on YouTube, some I'll watch some read some critical stuff on occasion, but I never actually take it for anything. I never actually like see it as anything more than just opinion pieces because that's all they are for one. And for two, most of the time critics it's literally their job to be over analytical, to be nitpicky as hell, to find every little flaw they possibly can or every little thing they can possibly interpret as a flaw and use it to shit on a movie. That's what critics do. They're critics, they're being critical. The problem with this is a lot of times that's what they're doing when they're watching the movie. They're looking for flaws. And because of that, they don't just enjoy the movies. Even movies that they do end up rating highly. It's just because they couldn't find all the flaws. It's not because of real enjoyment half the time. And obviously, I'm not counting for all critics there. There are obvious exceptions, but still. Um, that's why I've never really based or given any merit to reviews and stuff prior to seeing a movie. Why I always believe in I will make my own determining thoughts on it. I will figure out for myself based on my viewing experience what I think of it. Because not only do I disagree with most of the critics most of the time, but most of the time it's like I go into it and I really love a film and the critics pan it and it's like, why? And all of their reasons are nitpicks and just bullshit things that they had to come up with to try and shit on the film. And it's dumb. So I think it's pretty clear that this is another one of those films for me. I loved Space Jam: A New Legacy. I thought it was honestly my favorite movie I've seen from this year. It is my favorite movie of 2021 so far. Um, and I think it was fantastic. I think it was extremely well made, just like the original. And after over 2 decades, I think that this is not only just a worthy successor to Space Jam, but could possibly, in some ways, be seen as even better. But as we get into this review, we're gonna talk about the weaker parts because I will even nitpick myself a little bit here. There are three things that I could nitpick about this film. Three things that, if I really wanted to find something negative about it, these would be the only things. But at the same time, these are so minor, they did not affect the enjoyment of the story and the characters and the humor for me at all. So, nitpick number one, LeBron cannot scream. Every time in this movie, LeBron tries to yell or scream, whether it's because he's being like thrown through something or like launched through the server verse or whatnot, it always comes across as fake. Because it sounds like, when a YouTuber can't yell or scream because there's someone in the other room or something, so they have to kind of like whisper scream because they want to scream so bad because of something, but they can't because they'll bother other people in their house or whatnot. It's exactly like that. It sounds like he's forcing this whisper scream, and it sounds so fake and so forced, and it ruins the momentum of any scene that it happens in. It just completely just takes you out of the immersion of it. And it's like one of the only things in this movie that does. And it's distracting, to say the least. It sounds so corny and so ridiculously bad. Um, Number two, though, Lola and Bugs. In the first movie, yeah, they became a couple at the end, and it was very clear that that was a character arc they had with falling in love and everything. Even got a kiss. So, where is that in this film at all? It's made very clear that this is a sequel, that it is directly following the first film. Okay, well, not directly, not like right after, but you know what I mean. That it is following the first film, which is the third issue I'll get into in a moment as well. Um, but if that's the case, what happened to Lola and Bug's relationship? Like, there's a small implication that they broke up, but it's so small and so vague that it really doesn't actually tell you anything. You just kind of have to infer it. And it wouldn't have been that hard to put that in the movie. They could have easily put a single line in the movie that they broke up. That's all it would have needed. But it just, because of how notable that was in the first film, it just comes across as really weird in here that there's no mention of it at all. And the weird thing is, there's points where it looks like Bugs still has feelings for Lola, the ways he looks at her and stuff, but it never goes anywhere. And like I said, it doesn't hurt my overall enjoyment of the film, but it's noticeable. But my third issue, and this one's actually the biggest in my opinion, but also still does not actually affect my enjoyment of the film at all, is this is supposed to be a sequel. Like they blatantly say this in the movie that the events of the first happened. But how? In the first movie, we see the Looney Tunes pulled Michael Jordan into their world, kind of just like pulling him through a hole in the golf course and pulled him into their world, right? Kind of like this interdimensional portal, you could put it. In here, however, and if I haven't said it already, yeah, say it again. Spoilers. Notable spoilers for Space Jam: A New Legacy. Um, so if you haven't seen the movie, I would suggest seeing it first before continuing on. So spoilers in three, two, one, now. So in this movie, the Looney Tunes exist within the Warner Brothers serververse, which is literally data in a computer. They are they are data in a computer, and they have sentience and everything, of course. So it's like, yeah, you can argue that they're still real. But you could also argue that if in the first movie we're made to believe that the Looney Tunes and everything are real, that they're not like just cartoons, that they actually have real physical presence and everything. In this one, they don't. They're just kind of they're programs. Yet they refer to the events of the first movie. That would have to mean that Michael was not pulled into another dimension, but into the serververse. But the serververse wouldn't have existed back then because of, technology and how it is and everything, how it would have grown. But then the other question, but then it would lead to like, oh wait, but then would whoever runs the serververse have trapped the Looney Tunes in there instead? And that raises just a lot more questions. So that is definitely my biggest issue, but it doesn't really ruin the enjoyment of the film for me. It is a notable question that is raised. Um, so let's get on to the actual rest of the film and my general thoughts on it and everything. So this movie is about LeBron James having to basically become a better father in a way. Um, he's when he was a kid in this film, in terms of how his life goes in this film. When he was a kid, he was distracted all the time with stuff like a Game Boy, for example, as it shows. And his coach told him that he's never going to be the best if he keeps getting distracted like this. And unfortunately, he takes it to heart. He throws away the Game Boy and just puts all of his energy into basketball. And as it shows in the opening credits, it makes him the very best. But as we also see, it hurts his relationships to his family when he's an adult. Because now he is in the same position his coach was in. He's the one who's being too hard and just forcing this ideal on his son. He tells his son, like his younger son, because he has two sons and a daughter in this film, who aren't his actual kids in real life, by the way. Just like with Michael Jordan's family in the original Space Jam, this isn't his real family. Um, but he tells his son Dominic um, that focusing and getting distracted by all this video game stuff that Dom is really into is just going to take away from his basketball stuff. And it's very clear it's one of those times where, the parent is forcing their ideologies, their wishes, their goals onto their child. Because of how big basketball is for LeBron, he is trying to force his son to be into basketball too. But his son wants to be a video game designer. Unfortunately, LeBron doesn't see the appeal in that. So LeBron and his son end up going to this meeting at Warner Brothers for this idea to integrate LeBron into all of these Warner Brothers properties, just to kind of advertise for things and create this like entire thing for him to make him even bigger. And he hates the idea. He thinks it's stupid. And the AI that came up with this idea gets pissed at this and goes rogue. So the AI ends up kidnapping his son and him, turning his son against him, and forcing LeBron to compete in a basketball game to save his son, which is so ridiculously cartoony. It's awesome. The rogue AI is also played by Don Cheadle, who you might know as Rhodey, War Machine in the MCU, among many other roles. He is really good in this film. I did not know how he was going to be compared to like other roles I've seen him in, but he is really good. Like, I would honestly say this is one of his better roles, easily. He was so charismatic, so exciting and fun. And honestly, it was the most just entertaining and emotive acting I've seen from him. And so LeBron has to gather a team. He's first sent to Toon World by the AI, whose name is Algae Rhythm, by the way, like algorithm, obviously. He's sent to the Toon World where he meets Bugs Bunny, the only remaining Looney Tune there. He finds out that Algae Rhythm came along and basically sweet talked all the other Looney Tunes into leaving, that their talents were being wasted there, and that they would be better off somewhere else. So all of them went elsewhere, leaving Bugs alone and kind of bitter. um, so LeBron and Bugs steal Marvin the Martian's ship and head out to rescue everyone. LeBron wants to put together a team of these big names in Warner Brothers, such as Iron Giant and Superman, all these big names that are owned by WB. But Bugs insists that they focus on saving his friends and working with them instead, which honestly is the right call. This is a Space Jam movie, and it's like, we don't want to overflow it with just nothing but these other characters. We want it to focus on the Looney Tunes. Um, so they go around to all these other properties, all these other Warner Brothers property worlds, and find their friends. And they're in all of these different things. Foghorn Leghorn is in Westeros from Game of Thrones, as Khaleesi, the Mother of Dragons, Daenerys Targaryen, I guess, if you want to say. You see, the funniest for me, no joke, is that Elmer Fudd and Sylvester, the cat, are in the Austin Powers universe. It is the funniest fucking thing because it's so unexpected to see Austin Powers, of all things. Sylvester is Dr. Evil's cat, and uh, Elmer Fudd is Mini Me. It's hilarious. Um, but like Daffy and Porky Pig are in the DC universe, with Daffy acting as Superman and stuff. And then the one that I think is focused on the most outside of getting Daffy and Porky is Lola. Because LeBron, after rescuing everyone else, LeBron is like, we need an actual basketball player here. And so Bugs is like, I know just the person. We'll go get her. So they go to not back to the DC universe that they were in before, but to a comic universe for Wonder Woman. And there they see on Themyscira, Lola is training to be an Amazon with Wonder Woman, Princess Diana. And we get to see her go through the entire like training gauntlet thing that we see in the Wonder Woman movies. Um, while Bugs and LeBron are trying to recruit her. And at first she's refusing. She's saying like, no, 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 this is where I belong now. This is what I'm doing. This is my goal. And she's almost going to finish, but then LeBron mentions that he's trying to save his kid, and she hesitates just long enough for her to not finish the course in time and fail at seemingly becoming an Amazon. But Diana reveals like, no, no, no. Part of being an Amazon is about following your morals, your heart, all of that jazz. And she's like, you're definitely an Amazon, Lola. And so she officially declares her as such and tells Lola to go help her friends, which she does. So I liked that. I really liked that. So they continue on, head back, and then basically the game gets ready to begin. Uh, Algae Rhythm comes back. He opens up this court and everything in the middle of the Toon world and brings in an audience filled of all the other properties from Warner Brothers, as well as um, people in the real world that he brings in literally through their screens, that he like zaps into the serververse through their screens and all, using some technology that Dom invented. Um, so they have their game. LeBron's family is there too. They were zapped in as well. They have their game, and at first LeBron is trying to play by the books. He tells the Looney Tunes to play by the books, but unfortunately, uh, the opposing team, the Goon Squad, who were all designed by Dom, all created by him, um, they're not playing by normal basketball rules. As such, they're getting style points and getting multiple slam dunks in just a few seconds, and their points go through the roof. And in the entire first half, they just destroy the Looney Tunes. It's at this point that LeBron realizes that he needs to loosen up and realizes what he had been doing was wrong in terms of how he treated his son, how he forced this really strict regimen on his son and everything. And he realizes he's doing the same thing to the Tunes, so he tells them that let's do it their way in the second half. And so they do. And it allows them to win. By being loony, by being toony, they win. And yeah. So there's a few things to talk about here. First off, um, this movie makes full use of the Looney Tunes. Like the first movie had only a few of them that really had notable focus, while the others just had like a single moment in the film, basically. This one makes full use of all of them. They all get great moments, all get great lines, and all feel it feels like they're more like used throughout. Another thing of note with this film is Lola. That was one thing people were always worried about with this film, because how would they portray Lola? And I was definitely really worried, because not even just because of her redesign and everything and her making her less sexy, but the fact that I was hoping to God they would not make her like the Looney Tunes show version, because the Looney Tunes show version is so fucking terrible. Because it's like you take this sexy, confident, extremely inspirational, likable character from the original film, who has this wonderful sense of agency and self to her, and you turn her into a psychopath. In the Looney Tunes show, Lola is a psychopath. She's psychotic. She's toxic as hell. She's completely unlikable. There's nothing likable about her at all. It just ruins her character. Luckily, they went in a different direction. She's not the same as she was in the first Space Jam, but she's also not Looney Tunes show Lola. They instead opted to make her into kind of your like strong, independent female badass character. And I'm okay with that. My my issue with this though, and I guess this is another issue I do have with the film, but this is more of an issue with, I guess, the director than the actual movie itself, because you don't actually see this in the movie. Um Apparently the director said that he wanted to tone down Lola because he wanted to tone down her sexiness and stuff, because he wanted to make her like more of a inspiration and everything. He wanted to make her more um you know, he wanted to make her more of a role model for the viewers and the kids and all. And it I, I could go more into it if I remembered exactly what he had said in his statement and all. But basically, what it comes down to is basically what he said is because she was sexy, she couldn't be a role model for kids. And it's the dumbest fucking take, because it's like you're it's basically policing her body in a way. And yeah, I know it's a fictional character. I know it's a fictional bunny. But still, it's like you're saying like, "Oh, you have to tone it down or you can't be a role model for kids." That's basically what it's saying. It's really fucking gross. Um when that was like said and everything, like I posted on Twitter about it and stuff. And I talked about it because it's like it just bothered me so much. It's such a terrible take. It's so terrible and kind of sexist. But like I said, that's not actually part of the movie itself. For what we got in the film, Lola was a good character. She was well done. She was still a badass basketball player. And she did really well in terms of her interactions with the other characters, especially with LeBron. She had a lot of good interactions with LeBron specifically. Um, so I still liked her character, very much so. Um, there was also some interesting little jokes spread throughout, and little references. And I'll get to the references in a minute because that's actually something I really want to talk about. But there's like little jokes spread throughout that are like really fun and goofy. and some of them will will poke fun at other franchises or whatnot, but I think the best ones are the ones that just really utilize the silliness of the overall concept of, Looney Tunes and a pro basketball player playing basketball for a strong reason. It's like, yeah, it's goofy, it's silly, and I like it when the jokes reflect that. Um, I really enjoy when things do that. Um, but yeah, let's talk about the references because this was a big point of contention for a lot of people. There's a lot of critics and stuff who are saying that this film is like it's corporate, basically. That it's just WB throwing all of their properties, all their IPs at you, and that it reads more like an advertisement than an actual movie. And that is just entirely false. Yes, there's a lot of references to other WB properties, both in terms of where they have to find all the Looney Tunes at, but also during the game, as I mentioned, um, the enemy brings in all of these different IPs, all these different characters to act as the audience. And you see characters from King Kong to the Iron Giant, and even really wild ones like Pennywise and the Droogs from Clockwork Orange. And hell, you even get to see the Moron Mountain aliens from the first Space Jam. They even make an appearance. Um, so it's like you get to see all these different properties, but outside of the stuff where they're rescuing the Looney Tunes earlier on, they're basically all in the background, and it doesn't take away from the actual story and events happening. Everything is still focused almost entirely throughout the entire film on the main story, on the Looney Tunes, on LeBron, on the game. And it's not even really that distracting. And I'm a very distractible person. It's not even really that distracting. It's like it's very easy to just focus on the main story because, well, it's focused on. It's in the foreground. It's made apparent. I never found myself getting like too lost with the crowd and never like felt like I was just focusing too heavily on that. No. I like noticed some of the references for sure. I glanced around, saw some of them, but my focus was always on the main story because that's definitely how it was presented. It never took away my focus. Um, all the references in it, yeah, of course it's WB shilling their properties. It's a movie, and if you don't think the original Space Jam like was clearly doing shit like that too, you didn't watch the original. It's like you got to realize what kind of movie this is meant to be. It's a comedy that is made for all ages. It's going to do that kind of stuff, and it's Looney Tunes especially. It's going to do shit like that. But again, it's not most of the movie. In fact, it's very little of it, and it's always in the background, and it's never the focus. I've seen all these reviewers, all these critics acting like it's like this big part of the film, like the movie is entirely just this corporate cash grab because of that, and they're just trying to. It's this advertisement for uh, whatever streaming service, HBO Max or whatever, because of it. And it's like, no, you're missing the point here, and you're seeing things that literally aren't there. You're putting the focus on that because that's what you want to see. but that's not what's actually happening. It's like, again, yes, these references and all are there, but what I'm saying is that the critics are seeing it as if it's this bigger thing, as if it's something that's encompassing this entire film and taking the focus away from the actual story and character and main characters, and it's not. It's so blatantly not. So it's like this is one of the critical issues that people have been having that just does not in any way make sense to me, because it's like there's no basis for it. Um, and I like how, once again, just like with the first film, the actual basketball game doesn't run by like real basketball rules. It runs by like, well, in the first game is more like cartoon rules, and this one is more video game rules, because of Dom's game that this is based, that the basketball game they play is based on, and everything. I like the designs of the Goon Squad members; they're really creative and interesting. Though the members themselves don't have really much of any character, except for maybe the Kronos guy. He has a little more to him, but all in all, they're not as memorable as the Monstars from the original movie. I will admit that. Um, but they aren't really the true. I mean, you could kind of say the Monstars weren't the true villains either. Danny DeVito's boss of the Monsters, I can't remember the character's name, but he was definitely the main villain of the first one. While the main villain of this one is obviously Don Cheadle. But yeah, it's still, it's like they're very clearly like AI programmed literally just for this. Unlike the Monstars, who were living, thinking beings with full sentience, these characters really aren't as much. So I never expected them, from when I was seeing the trailer and stuff. I never expected them to be like as interesting as the Monstars. Um, but overall, like, the game was really fun. I loved seeing the Looney Tunes, just once they got loony, just really get to go with all of the visual gags that they typically work with, such as Taz spinning so fast that he spins the entire court around and causes the opponent to score in the wrong basket. That was hilarious. Or or Wiley Coyote painting a train track and tunnel so that a train comes out and hits the opposing Goon Squad member. Like, so classic. Stuff like that. It's like it gets very Looney Tunes, and which is what you want. And the ending kind of confuses me in the same way that, it's like these are all part of this computer server, but it's like the ending. It's like Bugs, after supposedly sacrificing himself to help LeBron win the game and save his son without having to sacrifice himself. Bugs seemingly dies, but then he's back, but he's in the real world. Like, obviously they were going to not kill him. He was going to be back. But in the real, how did he get to the real world? And he mentions that everyone else is there too. How did they get there? That's like legitimately really confusing. That kind of goes in with the entire issue I had before with this is about it being on a computer server and all, and how is it a sequel with that? But it also goes into this issue of like, okay, how are they in the real world now? And it's just like that part I admit I don't fully understand. Um, but like I said, it doesn't actually hurt my enjoyment of the film. In the end, LeBron learns to let his son follow his own dreams, to not push his goals onto his son, that kind of stuff. And it's a good lesson, a very good lesson, because a lot of parents still do this kind of shit. Um, And there's only one thing in this film that I thought was really outdated. LeBron dabs. It is really outdated. It is a really outdated reference at this point, but I think that's the point because it was clearly meant to be cringy when he did it. He was actively trying to embarrass his son. So yeah, I think that was the entire point. um, but yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. I thought it was fantastic. It was really fun. I was enjoying myself literally the entire time. And I thought it was just a really well made movie. It's not perfect. Again, there are a few small things that I have issues, but again, they didn't ruin my enjoyment of this movie pretty much at all. They did not me, hurt my enjoyment. They did not stop me from being able to love it. And I think it's just a fantastic film. And I think that these critics who are panning it just they need to lighten up. They're being very much like LeBron was, honestly, falling into that same trap, just without the bad parenting aspect thrown in. But yeah, either way, sorry for this review being so long, but there's just so much I wanted to talk about with it. There's so much to talk about with it. And I know I didn't even get to everything. So if there's anything I missed, anything you want to hear me mention, feel free to leave that in the comments below. And tell me what you thought of this film down in the comments as well. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And for now, I'm Connie and I'm signing off. See you all next time.